The most special man in the world will have an aristocrat who will be loved by a man unlike any other. This divine message was received by a writer named Illendorf, and 2 daughters were born to him. His youngest daughter's name is Lorea. She is very beautiful, she has blonde hair and a beautiful body. Illendorf's eldest daughter's name is Julia, and she is also a very beautiful girl. Her older sister Juliana Knox von Eilendorf was so beautiful that she received letters from abroad, the whole empire praising her as a child sent by God. That's why Julia was loved everywhere, so much so that the nice girl was envied by almost no one. But a hidden enemy lurked among her entourage, found among the people close to her. There is shouting and accusations in the sister's house. Julia doesn't understand how her younger sister Lorea could do such a cruel thing to her, since Victor was her fiancé. Younger sister Lorea with a smirk on her face replies that older sister Julia should better watch out for her lover and fiancé, to which Julia tries to object, but the younger sister stands her ground. Lorea says that her sister Julia couldn't satisfy him and that's why her fiancé came to her, asking if it was her fault, while showing a hickey on her neck. Incredibly angry at this insolence, Julia is just furious, and Lorea doesn't even feel any guilt. Then Julia tries to hit her sister, but then her fiancé Victor bursts into the room and tells her to stop. Walking into the room, he stands behind his younger sister, and gently hugging her shoulders, he tells Julia that he doesn't believe the words of others, because first she forced the family to disown her sister, and now she wants to hit her. Julia tries to explain something to her fiancé Victor, but he doesn't want to hear anything and tells Julia to stop talking, while hugging Lorea. Still hugging her sister's fiancé, Lorea says she'll tell Victor everything, to which Victor replies in the affirmative, ready to hear her out. Julia doesn't understand what her little sister is doing. She tells her to tell the truth, while trying to get a hold of her. But Victor cuts her off and tells Julia that if she comes on to him, he won't be able to hold back. Julia is shocked by Victor's words. He takes Lorea away, who pretends to cry, but it's only a chirp, because as he leaves, Lorea turns around and shows her sister her smirk. Julia begins to gasp for breath. Because she couldn't breathe, she panicked and began to reach for the table where the picture of her family hangs. A few months later, Lorea and Victor marry. Once the youngest of the sisters is pregnant with his child, they walk around in their wedding clothes and show off to the public. The disgruntled crowd is talking amongst themselves about how unjust God is and how Illendorf's second daughter is a shameless woman. They all feel sorry for her older sister. Julia is just in shock at the way she was treated. She does not understand how she could do this to her. She says she will never forgive her sister. At this point, Juliana is called from behind by her father, looking rather discouraged and sad. The father takes her hand and lets her be angry at him for letting it happen. He had nothing to say for himself as a father. Illendorf, holding Julia's hand, falls to his knees weeping. He asks his daughter's forgiveness for his second daughter. Julia, telling her father that she is fine and her father may not apologize, she tells him to get up off his knees while holding out her hand to him. In the Illendorf house there's another scandal. Lorea is yelling at her father for leaving the entire inheritance to just one sister. She thinks that Julia and her father planned this from the beginning, at which point Julia enters the conflict, asking how her sister can talk to their father like that. Illendorf says that he made this decision a long time ago. He says that from this day forward, Lorea will never set foot in his house again, to which she says that everything is on Julia's side as always. She turns her back on her sister and father, and says she's going to watch her father and sister live here alone. Julia yells at Lorea's back to stop, and after telling Lorea to stop, she does stop as Julia ordered. She turns to Julia and says that since they're strangers now, maybe they should drop the formalities. And since Julia reminded her of something, she'll say one last thing: she and the Baron will be over soon, so let them rejoice and be happy while they have the chance. The older daughter tries to say something to the younger daughter, but she can't believe what's happening. The father puts his hand on her shoulder, calling her by name. Juliana says she shouldn't do that to her parent, but her father says that if she's worried about him, she shouldn't be, because he's fine. Julia says she can't just walk away, and that's why Julia's gonna talk to her about it. Illendorf tells his daughter that everything is fine, but she just tells her father not to worry because nothing is going to happen. She walks out the door. On a dark night, the chariot with Julia is driving somewhere. She thinks about what's going on, wondering when it all started and when Lorea started hating her so much. She thinks about what would have happened if when the divine message came she had cared more about Lorea, Would it have changed anything? Thinking about all this, Julia notices an earring with a red stone on the floor of the chariot. Not realizing whose earring it is, she bends down to pick it up. At this moment with the chariot something happens. The charioteer shouts something about the wheel, and the horse behaves extremely not calmly. To the sound of rain and thunder, the chariot falls down a huge cliff, with very strong lightning bolts behind it. In the chariot that fell to the ground, Julia asks why this happened and whether she was destined to die this way. She did nothing wrong, because there are those who have made many mistakes and she cannot die like that. Seeing a beautiful flower under the terrible screams of pain, Julia reaches for it. The eldest of the sisters appeals to God, saying that if there is one, let him take vengeance on them, and in the end, on her last breath, muttering something about her father. She was lying right next to the flower, and it responds positively. The beautiful flower turns into a young man who says she did nothing wrong. Calling her by her full name, a young man with white hair tells her that he will give Ameno Juliana a unique opportunity. Further we learn why Loriaten van Illendorf so disliked her sister, because her father always cared more about the second more, because the people of the empire considered her a saint. Her sister's fake smile in particular made her angry, so 6-year-old Loria decided to take off her sister's mask. But after 8 years, no matter how hard Loria tried, her older sister's mask still wouldn't crack, so she finally decided to try the last option. The Illendorf house was not quiet as usual, Julia shouting to her sister that what she was doing was dangerous. Lori had a sword in her hand. The youngest asked Julia if she was not comfortable. She suggested that she take off her sister's mask at the end. Juliana didn't understand what her younger sister was even talking about, but Lori was unbowed in her decision. She approached her sister with her sword and ordered her not to pretend to be. The older woman tells Loria to come to her senses, but she says with a crazy smile that it will all be over soon and swings her sword over Julia's head. Julia is sweating. She doesn't understand what's going on, but the mysterious stranger standing next to her asks if she's having a nightmare. Julia jumps up from the ground not realizing what is happening and asks the stranger who he is. But he just replies that he is here to help and Julia should not worry. Julia doesn't understand what he's talking about, but looking closely she sees that she is in outer space and begins to wonder if she's dead and what's going on. The guy introduces himself as Anan, and tells Julian that they should skip the formalities. She looks at him in surprise and notices that he is so white, but Anan merely asks Juliana what she wants. Anan offers to reincarnate her, or maybe bring her back to any year of her life, or rebirth her as a completely different person. A surprised Juliana asks Anan if it is possible, to which he replies positively, because it is possible. After conjuring the very same flower, Anan tells Julia to say anything and he will turn her every wish into reality. She remembered who Anan is. He is like a god, but he is another being that is not much different from him. According to her memories, Anan has a cold heart, unlike the common god everyone knows about. But sometimes this godlike being can be even more merciful than God himself, and kinder than all men. She calls him the devil, to which Anan says that's what they call him. That's what some people say about him, but he wishes she'd call him Anan. He touches her chin and tells her she can wish for anything. He asks her to tell him what she wants. Anan says he'll do anything, and even if it's revenge he'll listen to her, and do anything. Julia is surprised. She remembers her sister and thinks about revenge. She thinks that despite all her wrongs, Julia tried to forgive her, but she said something that hurt her, and she will not forgive her. She tells Anan in that case to help her. She wants those who brought her suffering, those who brought her sorrow, those because of whom she died, to deserve her revenge. Anan hugs Julia, pulls her close and tells her that whatever she wishes will come true, while kissing her on the forehead. Anan says he will do it, and suddenly Julia is very sleepy, and then he hears Anan saying that he loves her, and asks her how long she will be his only one. Next we see Anan claiming that he said everyone thinks they're right for each other, lying in bed with him, Juliana saying she loves him. Juliana goes somewhere else, and Anan, who was in bed with her before, yells at her not to leave him. Juliana doesn't know what's going on. A frightened Juliana is called out by someone. She sees Anan. He asks her if she is okay and says he has done everything she asked. Juliana still doesn't understand what is happening. Anan tells her to look around. She doesn't understand, but Anan explains that he's turned back time, or to be more precise, he's revived her body. Only now she realizes she's come back to life. Juliana wonders if such a thing is really possible, or not. Looking at Anan, she realizes the truth and thinks that the devil does exist, Anne asks her with a satisfied look if she wants anything more, to which Juliana remains a little shocked and frightened. Anne tells her she can wish for anything, but Juliana thinks maybe she should ask him for the memories of their time in bed together. The eldest of the sisters asks Anne if there is a limit to the number of wishes and if there is a fee for them, to which the jolly devil replies that there is not. Juliana suddenly feels uncomfortable. She wonders what's going on. It's windy now, and when she was dying it was quite hot. She thinks it can't be like this. She turns to the devil, who asks if she remembers the wish she wants to make, and Anne looks very cheerful. But Juliana says that's not the reason for calling him out. Juliana asks Anne how long it's been since she died, to which the devil says it's been about 1.5 years since she died. Juliana realizes that she is dead, and if she comes back after 1.5 years it could be a big problem. She doesn't know what to do. Anne notices that Juliana hasn't even thought about asking for his help. She doesn't know what he's talking about. But Anne goes on to say that he's already said he'll help, so why bother? Looking directly into Juliana's eyes, he reminded her that he told her he would do anything, so why doesn't she ask for help? To which Juliana says isn't it enough that Anne brought her back to life, to which the devil says only one word: no. Looking at Anne, Juliana asks herself why the devil himself is helping her, at which point Anne approaches Juliana and with their foreheads touching he tells her that she worries too much. Juliana bounces off Anne with squeals and asks him what he's doing, but he doesn't even bother telling her that she's so cute now. The devil tells Juliana that he's already dealt with what's bothering her and looks her straight in the eye and asks her if there's anything else he needs to do. Anne continues to communicate with Juliana, who wanted to meet her father, but Anne tells her that this cannot be allowed. Juliana is very disappointed because she loved her father very much. She starts talking about her father, saying that he cared more about his reputation than himself. She realizes that he must have been very sad when he found out about her death. In tears, Juliana asks Anne why she can't see her beloved father. She wants it so badly. The devil didn't give any answer that would satisfy her, so Juliana asks if she can see her father from afar, to which the devil already agrees. Anne specifies that Juliana is only allowed to look at her father. She is not allowed to talk to him. But Juliana is happy with this. She thanks the devil for this opportunity. She looks very happy. Anne hugs Juliana and tells her they have to go now. A blue glow appears around them. It's night outside. They move to Illendorf's house. Juliana is incredibly shocked at how the house looks. It looks very dilapidated and unkept. She doesn't understand why the house is so neglected, and where is her father? You can hear someone coughing. It's Illendorf himself. Juliana finally sees her father. Illendorf stands in front of a painting of him and his daughters, with his hand on Juliana, asking for her forgiveness, regretting that he did not stop his eldest daughter at that cancerous moment. Illendorf coughs again. Juliana's eyes fill with tears and she struggles to keep from crying, saying that he used to be perfectly healthy. With a squeal, Juliana tries to run to her father to see him again, to talk to him again. But Anne grabs her arm and reminds her not to do that. The devil tells her that he understands her condition at the moment, but that they should not see each other right now, and if Juliana is concerned about his health, he will take care of it himself. A sobbing Juliana asks that Anne promise her that he will take care of his condition, to which Anne says he promises without hesitation. Juliana stops crying and Anne asks her if she feels better now. Juliana says she does feel better, but she still has one unanswered question. Anne asks what Juliana wants to ask him, but she asks why the devil himself is helping her, why she deserves to be treated this way. Anne asks her why she thinks he's helping her. Not understanding, Juliana thinks Anne just wants her soul. Touching Juliana's head, Anne says that he will leave the task to the girl. She doesn't understand the task. Anne says that the task is for her to guess why he is helping her, and why he wants her to be happy. Anne claims she can understand why he does what he does, but she doesn't understand how a simple girl can reason with the will of the devil himself. Then Anne says they should go back, turns his back to Juliana and starts to walk away. The girl doesn't understand, but notices that he's avoiding the question on purpose. It was obvious to Juliana that Anne was hiding something. He is the devil after all. It was a very tense moment for her. Juliana decides that she needs to make sure of something. She calls Anne by name, but then she notices that loud laughter can be heard from her father's house. Juliana doesn't understand and is very surprised. Looking towards her father's house, Juliana is incredibly shocked because she didn't expect to see her sister Lorea there. Lorea is talking to some man, She asks him if he's telling the truth, to which the man says he gives someone no more than 5 days. We realize it's about Illendorf. Lorea is very excited about it, saying that this beautiful estate that belongs to her father will finally be hers. She says it's been a long time. Juliana realizes her sister's plan. She's going to leave her father untreated and let him die to get his estate. The words that Illendorf is already weak affect Juliana's mood very much, and then Anne appears from behind and calls out Juliana's name. She tells Anne right off the bat that she has a wish. She wants Anne to make sure that God's message from the past is confirmed. Juliana thinks about what's going on and concludes that she can never forgive her sister Lorea. The action takes place in the Empire a year and a half after Juliana's death. It turns out that after her birth the temple was quiet, but recently a new message from God was announced. The one who was loved by a different person will return to her homeland and not alone, and the place where they will come will be blessed forever and become a paradise forever. The Supreme God's open love for Baron Illendorf attracted a lot of public attention, and later people were divided in their opinions. Some people wanted to rebuild relations with the Baron, and some people didn't want to do what the others did. A glass of wine shatters against the wall. Lorea is screaming again in her father's house. She doesn't understand why the Baron doesn't want to see her. She's a daughter too. She's very sad, because she says that a little more and everything would belong only to her. Loretta can't believe Juliana came back alive after everything that happened, and she doesn't understand the message. She thought it was her chance to get revenge on those who ignored her. After Lorea stole her sister Juliana's fiancé, she became countess, but she was not universally recognized, for all people believed that Lorea had unashamedly stolen her sister's place. Lorea heard insults and even accusations that the child was not from the groom. People whispering among themselves insulted Lorea. Even the Empress ignored her. Suddenly Lorea and Victorf received a letter from the Imperial Palace. They were very surprised by it. Lorea thought that Her Majesty must want to congratulate them on their marriage. When Victor opens the letter from the Imperial Palace, he sees that it is an invitation, but it doesn't say anything about Lorea, so he says he has to go alone. Lorea is very angry. She doesn't understand how this is even possible, and how God can be so unfair. She wondered why Juliana had been chosen by the god, but then Lorea, who had cooled down a bit from anger, started laughing very loudly and turned to the maids with a smirk. She says with a smirk to the maids that Juliana is still her sister, even though she took her sister's fiancé and abused her. Juliana chased her sister until her death. The maid asked if everything would be all right. She was a little worried after God's message, to which the maid received a short answer. It's hard to call her kind, but she's gentle. Juliana asks if it's true that Mr. Bisher has announced God's message again, even though she asked for it. Bisher says it's all right, because Bisher owes him. A maid comes in. She thought they'd already left, but it's a good thing she stopped by to bring them breakfast. Juliana says hello to the woman. The woman asks how they are sitting there so quietly and there was not a speck of dust, and asks Juliana and Anne if she said she would leave today, because the festival is in full swing and she will go to see it and then come back. The woman wishes them a pleasant appetite. Juliana tells Anne that she realizes that people won't recognize her thanks to Anne, but she's still scared that someone might recognize her, to which Anne just calmly tells her not to worry. Until this day, Juliana had been a little worried about the immorality of such a godsend, but since Anne had said it wasn't a problem for Bisher, she would be a little more at ease. Juliana notices that there is a lot of noise outside because of the festival, so she tells Anne to just look at what is going on, because there is a festival in the village. Juliana looks out the window and tells Anne that it's the first time she's seen such a thing. She thought there might be a lot of delicious things out there. Anne hugs Juliana and she says that she thinks that what the kid on the street is carrying will be sold in one of the stalls. Anne looks at what's happening on the street and says that people haven't changed much. Juliana is surprised that Anne has been in the human world before, and naturally she asks him about it. But he says he has been in the human world before, with Bisher, who asked Anne to help with the epidemic. Juliana says she thinks she knows when it was. She says it seems like it was over 10 years ago, and there was a plague. Anne says everything Juliana said is completely true. Anne, kissing Juliana's hand, says that if it wasn't for Bisher then, 10 years ago there would have been no one to stop the pandemic, and without his help people would have died out back then. Even though there were many casualties then, the important thing is that the epidemic was eventually stopped and did not recur. and Juliana thinks that it seems that Anan put a lot of emphasis on casualties. Juliana offers Anan to go with her and see how the festival is going. She wants to taste the food from a stall. Juliana asks if they can go together. Juliana and Anan have a man asking where they've been, mentioning that he's been looking for the Holy Father all this time. Anan asks if he has to ask people for permission to do this, and Anan looks a little annoyed. The man says he's with his own, and what happens if something bad happens? At least let them take the knights with them. Anan asks what could possibly happen. Aren't they the same people? Or maybe it's that he's considered so incapable. The man mumbles about something and can't give a concrete answer. Anan tells Juliana they have to go now. Juliana says that even though the plan is to be Anan's bride, she's not used to being one. Seeing Juliana's annoyed look, Anan asks Juliana what's going on. What's wrong? Maybe she's got something wrong. Juliana tries to say she's fine, and then Anan gets very close to her. She says she's fine, but she's surprised he's so close to her. Anan puts his hand over Juliana's face and asks if she doesn't like the temple. He tells her that if she wants, Anan can create a luxurious island, or a beautiful new castle, to which Julia says it's not about the place at all. Anan realizes that something is wrong and she doesn't like it, so he insists that Juliana tell him what she doesn't like. After some thought, she decides to ask Anan what's bothering her. She asks him why she can't see her father. She remembers that only her father has always been on her side and she would like to meet him as soon as possible and reassure him. Anan asks if this is the motive that has her so agitated. Juliana sadly says that it is. Anan puts his arm around her and tells her he needs someone to tell her better than him, and he starts dancing with her. Immediately they appeared in an embrace in the temple, where the woman was frightened and fell to the floor. She rises and asks Anan and Juliana where they were. Anan tells the woman that they were just looking around on the streets, and it's very noisy. He says that the woman has some explaining to do. Apparently he wants her to explain to Juliana why she can't see her father. Juliana immediately tells the old lady that she wants to see her father. The woman has a little trouble finding the words, but she tells Juliana that it's a bit of a problem because Juliana is already dead, and her soul has left her body and gone to Mr. Bisher. Apparently Juliana needs some kind of ritual to come back to life, and it requires holy water purified by God's power and the Bisher's will. Anan notes that she needs to meet Bisher in person to do this. Juliana is a little scared, but Anan says it's okay because he's there for her. The old woman says Sir Anan is Bisher's brother. Juliana wonders what will happen if Bisher refuses or if they can't meet him at all. Anan gets very close to Juliana again and tells her that she's thinking too much. He reminds her that he said he would arrange for her to meet her father, but he asks her if she thinks he'll do it for nothing. Juliana is sad again and tells Anan that she can't pay him for this kind of favor, to which Anan says he doesn't believe her because she's standing in front of him now. Anan again says that he will let her meet Bisher and then her father Baron Illendorf, and will help her get revenge in any way he can. And in return, he asks that Juliana just give herself to him. Anan tells Juliana that she'll belong to him. If Juliana is willing to agree to his terms, she just has to hold Anan's hand, and Juliana gives him her hand, right after which Anan presses it against her. As usual, Anan tells Juliana not to worry because Anan is there. Then a light comes on and Juliana doesn't know what's going on. Anan and Juliana are transported to a place. Juliana is surprised that it happened so quickly and painlessly. Anan says it's not easy to get here unless the person trying to do it is a god. He tells her that if she were alone she would be torn up. She realizes that without him she would be torn up, and she was filled with emotion. She became very scared and clung to Anan herself. Suddenly another handsome young man comes up to them half naked. Juliana is a little scared and he asks her if she is really that scared. We realize that this man is the same Bisher. Juliana is very surprised that it's Bisher. He says that he is her supreme god, because her supreme god looks much more frivolous than she thought. Juliana wonders about the relationship between brothers Anan and Bisher, whether it's a bad relationship. Bisher asks his brother what the problem is because he has done everything Anan has asked him to do. Holding Juliana close to him, he says she wants to see her father, but her soul has not been cleansed yet. The arrogant and self-righteous Bisher realizes what he's talking about, and asks if Anan wants to say they need his blessing. Anan tells his brother that he doesn't think Juliana considers Bisher her supreme god, but Juliana denies what Anan said, but he just silences her and agrees with what he said. Bisher laughs at everything that's happening right in front of him and asks when did Anan and Juliana get so close. Anan says that his brother should just shut up and bless them, because time is short, and he looks a little nervous. Bisher still says he's got it all figured out, so they need a blessing. Riley saying he thought his brother was going to introduce him to his fiancée. Bisher approaches Juliana and greets her. Then someone's finger touches Bisher's chest, and we realize it's Anand's finger, telling Bisher not to get so close. Bisher tells his brother that he's very narrow-minded, saying he's already helped Anan. To which he says, "No kidding, you can't touch or go near Julia and Bisher." Bisher says he's helped Anan here and there, and Anan doesn't take long to ask and what his brother wants from him. Juliana looks at them in amazement, and wonders if they are gods, but they swear like ordinary village children, and then tells his brother to bless her quickly and disappears. Juliana starts laughing at what she sees, to which Bisher tells her that she is really beautiful. He puts his hand on her head and says that she is his masterpiece, because he has never worked on anyone as hard as he has on Juliana. Still with his hand on Juliana's head, he says her name in full, and Juliana notices that she feels empty, but Bisher says he blesses her. Juliana sees the golden waves and feels the warmth. Bisher then asks Juliana if Anan said that despite her request he would listen to her, to which Juliana replies in the affirmative. Bisher says the same thing applies to him, because Bisher says he and Anan will always be on Juliana's side, to which Anan says it's too late to say that. Bisher doesn't understand why it's late because he's watching his behavior, and Juliana doesn't understand what's going on because she feels like it's déjà vu. Anan tells Juliana that it's time for them to leave, asking if she didn't want to see her father sooner. Leaving, Juliana asks Anan what Bisher was talking about, to which he says to just let it go. Bisher tries to say something, but Anan stands his ground. But Bisher says that if Juliana and Anan need anything, they should let him know. Then a glow appears around Juliana and Anan, and after they disappear, the supreme god Bisher asks for forgiveness from someone. Anan and Juliana appeared in the temple, the same yellow glow around them. All the people in the temple are looking at them with their mouths open. They are very much surprised by what they saw. Juliana doesn't quite understand what's going on. She asks herself a question in her head. Why are they looking at them like that? Thinking that maybe everyone was waiting for them. Among all the people there is that wishful woman. She asks Anan and Juliana if they have met Sir Bisher. Anan says that he and Juliana have received a blessing from Bisher, and now they can begin the ritual. The woman is surprised at this suggestion. She says that Miss Juliana needs a rest, to which Juliana replies sharply that she is fine and feels fine, so let the woman begin the ritual. Juliana wants to see her father as soon as possible. The older woman replies to the girl that she is very happy that the girl is okay. Anan sat on the chair. Juliana was on his lap. She thinks that Anan still hasn't let her go. She was very surprised that Anan suddenly grabbed her waist. She doesn't know what he's going to do. Anan lifted her up a little and let her go. Julia thanked him for that, but she didn't understand why the devil let her go, because before he had held her quite tightly by the waist. Juliana asks Anan a question. She asks what if asking her to help her with revenge could hurt someone else, other people, or even Anan and his brother Bisher. Anan looks at Juliana and asks if she's worried about the priests and Bisher or just him, to which the girl says she's worried about everyone. The devil looks at Juliana and tells her to worry only about him, to which Juliana thinks that if anyone hears his words, they will think that Anan is in love with her. Suddenly, the woman calls out to them and says that the preparations for the ritual are complete. Immediately after which the old woman calls her to come to her room to begin the ritual. The woman extends her hand to Juliana, who has already approached her, and tells her to extend her hand in return. Juliana is a little confused, but she also extends her hand to the woman. Suddenly the same yellow glow that was there when they left Bisher appears around their hands, and Juliana feels Bisher's warm energy. Bisher's energy takes different forms. Juliana sees it and gets a little scared, but the old woman is undeterred and tells her to just relax. Juliana rises into the air and a yellow glow envelopes her entire body. The old woman hits the floor with her cane and Juliana descends back down again. The people there bowed their heads and Juliana asked if the ritual was over, to which the old woman said that it wasn't scary. She said it was a simple ceremony that secures the blessing. She joyfully calls out to the devil and tells him that the ritual is finally over, but notices that from the look on his face he seems to be angry. He looks pretty pissed off. Juliana asks him about it, if he didn't like it, to which he gets a little negative answer. But Juliana realizes that he's so tight-lipped that he's probably unhappy about something. Anan tells Juliana that it seems the priests have already brought her father here. He still looked extremely displeased. Juliana is very happy and surprised that her father is here. she will finally be able to see him because she missed him so much. She immediately turns her back to a shocked Anan and says she should go. Her father is waiting for her. She runs for the exit while Anan stares at her back. The old woman calls out to Anan, but he immediately and rudely tells her that she is not welcome. The woman does not understand what Anan is saying, but he explains that he only meant to say that her presence is not welcome. In his opinion, Bishar's servant simply stood by and watched Juliana being insulted, and as she was dying, after those words, black energy wraps around that woman's throat and begins to choke her out. This energy lifts the Bishar's servant off the floor, and then Anan asks if she really thinks he only wants to kill that duke, saying that if he wanted to, he would kill them all. According to Anan, he wants to build a fortress out of their bones and give it to Juliana to dance on. After these words he lets the panting woman go, and she falls to the floor with her eyes bulging. But she's the one Anan will spare because she's useful. So while she lives, if Bishar leaves a message, let her follow it. The woman asks if it's really for Juliana, to which the smug Anan just turns around and walks away, saying she underestimates him too much. Immediately a yellow energy appears around Anan and moves him right behind Juliana. He appeared immediately hugging her. He gently tells Juliana that it is him. Juliana tells him that he scared her a lot. Then she sees her father. Anan says he looks terrible. The man has really changed, not for the better. Juliana introduces Anan to her father, saying that he is Sir Bishar's brother, Anan. But Anan himself is not very happy with this introduction, just Bishar's brother. Juliana, Anan and Illendorf are in one of the buildings of the temple where Juliana performed the ritual. A building not easily accessible even to the emperor himself. First of all, Illendorf asks Juliana if it is true that the man sitting next to her is a god. Juliana listens to the question and decides to answer her father. She says it's up to her father to believe or not, but the Anan who's with her now is a god. Illendorf begins to think about what he has heard. He compares all the facts. Because Anan is the brother of Bishar, the supreme god, Illendorf found this hard to believe. Even though it was disrespectful, he could not believe it. However, his dead daughter returned alive. He recalls seeing Juliana in the temple for the first time since her revival. Juliana tells the weeping Illendorf that she is alive because of Anan's help, and the girl's father immediately kneels before Anan and begins to thank him unceasingly. Arrogantly, Anan tells kneeling Illendorf that he doesn't need his gratitude. Illendorf replies that he understands, and how can someone like him ever reason with the will of a god? Because he just met his daughter, he thought he'd lost her. All the while Illendorf couldn't stop his tears. He was sobbing saying all this. Seeing this, Juliana fell down beside her father and hugged him. Seeing all this, Anan told the two that they needed to be alone together. Alone. Juliana apologizes to Anan for not being able to stop crying. But Anan even here does not miss a moment to compliment Juliana. He says that she should not apologize, because she is beautiful even when she cries. Juliana is very pleased to hear Anan say that. But then a slightly embarrassed Juliana asks Anan if he's faking it. Juliana's question makes Anan think, but she says there's no one else around right now, so there's no need for it. Anan looks at Juliana and tells her that he doesn't understand why Juliana thinks that, and she asks him if he's not just doing her a favor, to which the devil says that he didn't say he would pretend at her request. With Anan looking very calm and cheerful. Juliana again says she doesn't understand anything. But Anan says she doesn't have to, she needs to practice. And then he gets up and moves closer to Juliana. She again doesn't understand what Anan is doing, but he comes very close to her, raises her head with his hand and tells her that when he does that she freezes, and other people will figure her out right away. Juliana says that anyone would freeze like that, because when a god is in front of you, of course anyone would freeze. But Anan says that to follow the plan, he must help Juliana with the practice. Juliana crosses her fingers and starts to crack. Anan is completely shocked and doesn't understand what is going on, and what Juliana is doing. He asks her if Juliana is seducing him in this way. She puts her hands over her face and wonders what to do since something is wrong with her face. But Anan tells Juliana not to cover her face. He wants her to remove her hands. She puts her hands on Anan's face and wonders what to do. She is shy because Anan is so close to her. Juliana bites her lip. He tells Juliana not to bite her lips so that she doesn't hurt her lips. Juliana is surprised. Who cares if she hurts her lips or not? Anyway, Juliana thought that because of her cruel sister, she'd never be able to go out again. Lorea was very badly behaved while Juliana was away. She fought with her father, yelling at him why it was so hard for him to not only give her property, but even meet her. According to her, Juliana died anyway. And now there's only one heir to all her father's wealth, and she's the only one who can inherit it all. And no matter how much her father pushed her away, no matter how much he shunned her, everything he had would sooner or later belong to her. Illendorf just kept quiet the whole time. Juliana doesn't understand how her sister could say that. She's a little confused. She doesn't know if it's really the girl Loria she knew. She realized that her father had put up with so much from her sister because of her stupidity. Juliana was ashamed. She couldn't even look her father in the eye. Looking at her father, she realized that he had lost a lot of weight. Juliana realizes how hard it has been for her father the whole time she has been away. Juliana realizes that she has to come to her senses and do something about it, because she doesn't like what's going on very much. Anne asks what Juliana is distracted by sitting in front of him, to which she says she's just thinking about her sister. And Anne asks if she's the girl who insulted the Baron. Anan gets very personal with Juliana again, and she says he's right. She's worried about the rumors her sister's been spreading while she's away. Anne kisses Juliana on the forehead and asks her how she can act like he doesn't even exist. Juliana is very surprised by this behavior on Anan's part. But when he looks at her beautiful hair, he tells her they're gonna be married, so she has to be ready. Anan looks delighted. Sitting in bed and hugging her pillow, Juliana thought about what Anan had said. If they were going to be married, she realized that only Anan knew the answer to that question. But when he calls her by name, in a voice warm as petals on a spring breeze, she thinks she's in the middle of a garden full of color. When he calls her softly in that voice, she thinks he really likes her. But she doesn't think he does. Juliana looks rather worried. She wonders if Anan is just trying to seduce her in this way, while imagining the biblical picture of a snake biting into an apple. She can't understand what's going on. She can't even ask her father. Juliana turns in bed, thinking that someone would give her advice on what to do. Suddenly Juliana hears a strange sound that disturbs her. She jumps up on the bed and looks around, making sure that there is no one in the room. But she saw only a flower. Juliana got out of bed and slowly approached the flower. But she had thought there were no flowers in the room before. Was it Sir Enan? She takes this flower from the vase and holds it to her chest, asking the flower if it's Anan. With sadness in her eyes, she says of course it's not Anan. She looks very sad. Just then Anan appears behind her and hugs her tightly, asking Juliana if she called for him. Juliana is startled as usual by his sudden appearance behind her. He asks his beloved if she didn't like it, to which Juliana, who is confused, doesn't know what he's talking about and asks if he left the flower in her room. Anan says he got a little excited when Juliana cried. He gently touches her face. She looks a little sad, and her eyes are heavy. Juliana realizes that Anan is worried about her, and immediately becomes a little more cheerful. She thanks Anan and looks at the flower. She looks at Anan with an incredibly tender gaze. Holding his flower in her hands, she says his name as if trying to tell him something. Anan looks very embarrassed. He is blushing and his eyes, like Juliana's, are filled with emotion. He tells Juliana to rest and energy comes back into his body. Anan disappears. Juliana is alone in her room again. She realizes that this flower is one of a kind. She sniffs it to smell it. Juliana realizes that Anan created this flower especially for her. She is very pleased. She calls for Anan again and realizes that if he doesn't come she can't even meet him of her own accord. She thanks Anan for the flower, but his actions confuse the lovely Juliana. Then Anan reappears behind her and hugs her very tightly. Juliana is surprised by his appearance as usual. She can't figure out whose heart is pounding like that, hers or Anan's, who is hugging her tightly from behind. Suddenly she hears a voice that tells her not to think too badly of him. She realizes that it is the voice of the supreme god Bishar. He says that Anan's words are harsh. He may seem harsh and cold. But then she realizes that Anan is a good guy. Juliana realizes that Bishar is not talking to her now. She can't hear his voice. Just feels like memories are coming back into her head. All the while she's got Anan behind her, calling her by her name, Alian. He says he'd like to address Juliana by a special nickname that will be just for him. Juliana thinks that Anan can't be calling her Lin. She hears some ringing sound that is unpleasant to her, to say the least. Anan puts his hand on Juliana's shoulder. She turns and looks straight into Anan's eyes. He says it's okay and he knows how to wait, and his body glows with a kind of bluish light. Juliana doesn't know what he's waiting for. Juliana goes for a walk. It turns out that 15 days have passed since her return. She seems pretty happy. So when the whole month is over, she'll be able to show up in front of everyone. Thanks to Sir Bisher, she and Enon receive help from the temple, and in the temple, its attendants respectfully greet Juliana and ask if she is comfortable in her new clothes. Juliana also greets the temple attendants in return, which makes her a little uncomfortable at times. The attendants say that Anan is waiting for her in the main temple. She thanks them for the information, and thinks they realize that Juliana is coming to him. When she enters the main temple, she apologizes to Enon and asks how long he has been waiting for her. But he turns to her and looks at her in love. Anan says that Juliana looks good in her new clothes. The girl blushes a little and thanks Anan for the compliment, and says that Anan looks good in his new clothes too. Anan does look majestic in his new clothes, as if he were an emperor, and Juliana, blushing again, says that the new clothes suit him very well. Although Juliana notices that his ordinary clothes are also very beautiful, she asks him if he is okay, because he appears as a human being and not as a god, which he is. It turns out Anan actually wanted to ask Juliana a question. She's a little surprised by this, but Anan asks if she's ready to hear his question. He says as soon as they see Juliana they'll try to tear her apart. He's already aware of that, but Juliana thinks Anan cares about her instead of worrying, though he doesn't show it. Juliana decides to answer his question and says she's fine, and even if she isn't, she must be fine, or pretend she is. Anan agrees with what Juliana said, but she remembers something else important. She grabs his hand and whispers in his ear that he is the new priest who was chosen by Bisher. She says he is a special man chosen by the supreme god, and then asks Juliana if he is being used as bait as a human. Juliana is confused. She freaks out and screams that it's impossible, to which Anan says she's caught again, which he says is why he laughed, asking her not to get mad. Juliana sits down on the steps and thinks about how they will react. She has no idea. She says she will just make a loud speech and if it doesn't work she will run to Anan. Anan supports Juliana and tells her to do just that. He tells her she can come running to him at any time. Anan says that no matter what happens, he will always be on Juliana's side, just as Juliana was on his, while gently touching her face. A month later, on the day of the service, before entering the temple, Anan asks Juliana if she's worried, and Juliana says that of course she's a little scared, smiling. Anan and Juliana hold hands. Juliana worries about whether they will believe in her return. Juliana tells Anan not to let go of her hand. It is clear that Juliana is a little nervous before such an important event. Anan says that Juliana should not be afraid because he will not let go of her hand. Juliana says that for some reason she feels that Anan has relaxed a bit since she heard the voice of the supreme god Bisher. Anan is a little surprised by this statement. Asking about Bisher's voice, Juliana says she noticed that he's relaxed only now. Juliana tells Anan when this happened, asking if he remembers the day he gave Juliana the flower. That's when Bisher said that his words were a bit harsh, and that in time she would realize that Anan was good. Anan reacted rather coldly to this statement, saying that it was time to go too. Juliana realizes that Anan doesn't seem to like this story about Bisher. Suddenly one of the temple attendants appears in front of him, and tells Sir Anan that while he is pretending to be human, the Holy Father should address him informally. He asks that Anan treat it with understanding. Anan says not to worry because he will follow Juliana's plan, and taking her hand again, he tells Lin it's time to go, to which she agrees. Bisher's name is going to announce something important. Anan tells Julian she's worried too much, but she says they're going out soon, so she gets nervous. Anan tells her not to worry because he's there for her, and thanks to Bisher, the people of the temple will help her in any way they can. When suddenly the girl on the outside says it's true. She says that under Bisher's orders, they will risk their lives and do whatever it takes for Juliana, and she has nothing to worry about because everyone in the temple will support her. Juliana thanks the girl for her support, and then they decide to open the door and enter the temple. Before entering, Anan tells Juliana that she has nothing to worry about because he's there for her anyway. She says she trusts him. There are a great many people gathered in the temple, including a great many important people, all the way up to the Emperor and Empress, and even Loria and her husband. All the people are very surprised to see Juliana. Her sister looks disturbed and the Empress asks the Holy Father what's going on. The priestess says that as she announced earlier, Juliana received the blessing of the upper god. He spared Juliana and brought her back to our world, the world of the living. She says that as servants of Mr. Bisher they have protected her, and from now on they will protect, defend and support her according to the will of God. The Emperor states that as far as he knows the temple does not take sides, but to support anyone is not in keeping with their neutral stance. to which he gets the answer that this applies to humans. The priestess again says that they are only following the will of Mr. Bisher, whom they follow and trust, to which she again receives a question, because now it appears that Mr. Bisher ordered to protect the daughter of Baron Illendorf. Putting her hand on the holy book, she says that Bisher said not just protect, they are those who follow the will of Lord Bisher, so all the temples in the empire will follow his order, and since Bisher said protect they will follow his order at the risk of their lives. The emperor wonders why everything is like this, to which he receives the answer that they have nothing to hide and the supreme god has sent them a saint who will become their follower. Lorea, who is in the hall with her husband Victorf, looks rather surprised, annoyed and even displeased with her sister's return. Juliana looks at them and realizes that no matter how much they think Lorea and Victorf were the only ones who could have killed her, she's just an ordinary person, so she can't hide everything, and Juliana won't shed a tear in front of her sister until it's proven to her. The monologue of the priestess continues. She states that she speaks to everyone on the orders of Mr. Bisher, and Anne, chosen by the supreme god, will inherit his position as Holy Father, and Juliana will be declared a saint. People in the audience are shocked. They talk among themselves whether it is real to declare her a saint. Someone asks if she is not dead, to which he gets the answer what he listened to because Mr. Bisher brought her back to life. The priest calls Anne back to his room, still holding Juliana's hand, and tells her that it's time for them to go, to which a pleased Juliana of course agrees. Anne tells Juliana if she has seen that her sister can't even look at her. Juliana directs her gaze to her sister, and says she has noticed it. Anne introduces himself to the people and says he will be the next Holy Father by the will of the Supreme God. He says he was once blessed by Mr. Bisher. He made him their guide, said he would guide everyone to the right path. Juliana notices that everyone is silent and happens upon him, noticing that he is peerless. After he's finished talking, the Empress starts yelling that there's no way a Bisher would sanctify him. She looks very annoyed. There is a glow around Anne, a glow around his head, and people are saying that Bisher sanctified him because of the Empress' words. A slightly annoyed Anne says that the Supreme God has summoned him, and that's the end of his monologue. He's said everything. An even stronger glow appears around him and Juliana, and after wishing everyone a good time they disappear. They move to Bisher. He asks how they are, because it seems that this time he did not miss the moment. Juliana thanks Mr. Bisher for his help. Anan tells Bisher that he feels it's disgusting to be his slave, and to stay away from him. Bisher doesn't understand why he's forbidden to approach Anan when all he wants to do is hug him once. So Anan takes him by the hair and tells his brother to get lost. Juliana realizes that the more she looks at them, the more it all seems familiar, and she can't understand why it's like this. Anan asks his brother why he called them. He starts by saying he almost went bald, and then he says it would have taken a second for Anan to start fighting with the Empress. Anan says that the woman should actually be grateful that he didn't kill her. Juliana is a little shocked by Anan's remarks, like he could have killed the Empress. Juliana is invited to join the brothers' dialogue. She agrees but thinks she must have caused the gods a lot of trouble. In the house, Lori is always heard shouting, obviously all because she is not happy with the return of her sister. As usual, glasses of wine flying around the house. She does not understand how she can be calm, and why she and not Lori. Why does everything go to her? If she'd known a man like that would come along, things would have been different. Lorea has new thoughts. She begins to think that Juliana pretended to give in to Lorea Victorf on purpose. She knew that this man would show up and she would come back to life. Lori thinks she needs to find out all about Anan, because she thinks he's the only way he can rise above her. But she's worried about the way she smiled, because it's the first time Lorea's seen her like that. If Mr. Bisher told her everything, because she got rid of all possible evidence. But she's uneasy. Also, the Empress has summoned Victorf. Lorea thinks she needs to see to it that there's no trouble. After the scandalous statement, the temple was busy with its own affairs. The Holy Father reduced his activity, giving way to Anan, who would be his successor, and restoring the image of Juliana, who was isolated from society, was just one of the problems. The priest tells Anan that he should go to the party anyway, because people have been interacting with each other since ancient times, and it's been very beneficial. The priestess realizes that Anan doesn't listen to anyone except Juliana, and being active in the community has its advantages. Juliana feels that there is an awkward atmosphere. The priestess says it's Countess Tenet. Juliana doesn't understand what Lorea has to do with it. She asks what's wrong with her, but the priestess says that it seems that because she took the place of the elder sister, she was not recognized by the vassals and the empress. When the royal ball takes place, the countess is hanging around the empress. But it doesn't bear fruit. The empress's attitude doesn't change, and there are rumors that she's about to get a divorce. Juliana realizes that all this means that her sister is a prize. She asks Anne if they can attend the ball or party, to which she gets the expected answer that everything will be as she wishes. The priest says that for a start it is assumed that the empress does not like the current countess, and that Miss Juliana will inherit the baron's vast fortune, however it may sound. But after Mr. Bisher's message, she will become a very valuable figure. Juliana notices that the empress never thought of her before, which is very funny in her opinion. She thinks that she couldn't help but hate Loria, who is of no use to her. Anan says that this woman is very evil inside, because she is so greedy that she is no better than the countess herself. Anan guesses why the empress wants Juliana. He realizes that she must want Juliana because she was blessed and brought back to life, and this woman must want the same thing. She wants to tie Juliana to the imperial family without knowing the truth, which is a relief to Enan because if people were that simple, he would kill them all. Juliana realizes that, as expected, Anan hates people. She thinks that if she makes a mistake, he will hate her too. Suddenly Juliana says that she loves only him, and why should he worry about others? The priest is confused by this statement, and Anan asks Juliana what is wrong. Juliana doesn't know if it was his voice or if she heard it. She thinks something is happening to her because she is hearing strange things. She said that Anan and the priest can keep talking and she wants to leave for a while. And before she's finished, Anan comes up to her and says he'll go with Juliana. She says she just needs some rest. But Anan is adamant that he has no reason to stay here without her. He says he's already sent the Holy Father away, and now that they're alone Juliana can tell what she's hearing. Juliana looks at Anan and blushes a little, and says that she doesn't hear anything like that, and there's no need to talk about it. She thinks about what she heard and tells herself that she will never say what she heard, as he confessed his love to her, and then we realize why Juliana said those words. Anan happily hugs Juliana and says that he thought it was about him, but Juliana is a little confused and says it's not, although she's obviously lying about it. Juliana's mind has dissonance again. She tells Anan that he can love them as much as she loves them. Then she talks to Bisher and tells him that he doesn't understand either, because these things are not worth it. Then she tells Anan that this value is not determined by anyone. She tells these two to stop. Putting her hand to her forehead, she realizes it's Anan and Bisher, but can't figure out what kind of girl is arguing with Anan. In her head there is a dialogue between the brothers, in which Anan says that this will not work and he'd rather do everything himself. Bisher answers him that he can't do anything for him now, after which Anan tells Bisher to leave. In reality, Anan tries to reach out to Juliana and asks if she's okay, to which Juliana says she's fine and throws Anan's hand away. Anan asks Juliana sadly if this is true, to which she says that one day he will understand her too. She turns her back on him and leaves, leaving Juliana looking at Anan and asking him to understand her. Anan picks flowers he hopes she'll like, and wonders if the ribbon that forms the bouquet is too simple. Juliana sees Anan asking her if she's awake. Suddenly she opens her eyes and sees Anan screaming and asking if she's okay, because she suddenly fell, and it scared him a lot. Anan holds her hand and Juliana realizes she has fainted. Anan kisses her hands and Juliana asks him if he is okay and how long she has been unconscious. A disappointed Anan says that Juliana has been unconscious for almost 2 hours, to which she says with a smile that thank God, because it's not as long as she thought, and asks him if anything has happened in the meantime. Kneeling beside her bed, Anan tells her that something might have happened. Juliana is a little surprised at this answer, which is also evident in her face. Anan sat down on the bed next to Juliana, and she addressed him, calling him Sir Anan, and thought about the fact that he hadn't left her side at all since that day, and then telling her to just call him by his first name. She ponders whether she should not call him by his name only during the common prayer, and already calling his name, he answers her, and asks what is wrong. Juliana asks him if he will go to the party with her. She reflects on the fact that the priest spent hours trying to convince him, and then tells Juliana that they will of course go to the party, and asks her where she wants to go. The priests who were nearby were very surprised that he had agreed so easily. It turned out that the Marquise of Arliot was holding a charity party, and the invitation to the party had been sent to Juliana personally by her father. Juliana says that apparently the bribes do not reach the temple, having taken this very letter in her hands, and then asks Juliana why she should go there. After all, they are not so nice people. But she says that she got a hint from the Holy Father and wants to check it personally. Anan smilingly opens the letter and says that apparently the temple has planted a couple of spies in the imperial family, also mentioning that the Marquis's son was helping the Countess. Also asking the girl if she thinks there will be evidence. Juliana says that she heard that a man with the Countess and her husband left their territory in a carriage that day. It turns out they went to the Baron's house together, but when they came back they were apart. And after that she died in that unfortunate accident, and the culprit was never caught. Anan says that all she has to do is want to, and tell him what she wants, and then he'll get any proof and confession he can to make sure everyone knows the truth. Juliana thinks that if she uses his power, everything will be solved easily. But first she decides to ask him a few questions. She asks him if her death was an accident, or if it was planned. Anan looks at her a little knowingly, and says there was a malfunction in the carriage she was riding in. He says something was done to the wheel, remarking that it's too dirty a trick. Juliana says she suspected it, but she's still very upset, and if it's true, she wants to handle it herself. The girl says that if things don't go as she plans, she'll ask for his help. Anan puts his hand on her head and says he'll be waiting. Juliana begins to wonder who could have set up her murder. Of course the first to come to mind is her sister, but she also considers the possibility that it was a conspiracy by Victorf. She realizes that no matter what, besides her sister and the Count, no one else had a reason to kill her, at which point Anan grabs her arm. He asks where the girl thinks she should go first. Juliana doesn't understand when he got in front of her, because she didn't even pay attention to it. She decides that she wants to accept the Marquise's invitation first, and as usual, Anan says he will help her as soon as she asks, but still he advises her to be careful, to which the girl responds positively. Juliana had expected this, but they cared for her more than she expected, and she was grateful for it, but it was too much. She decided to change her outfit before the charity party, but suddenly remembered that after the resurrection, she has no need to wear any dresses. Juliana remembers that she was told that she has more freedom of action because she is not a priest. But then someone calls out to her. Some guy says that they were waiting for her, and asks if Mr. Bisher has anything else to say. Juliana tells the guy that Bisher didn't pass on anything else of the sort, remarking that she's just going to a charity party. A guy hearing about the charity party looks very happy. He asks the girl if she has already picked out an outfit for the party. Juliana says she hasn't picked out an outfit yet, but notices that he looks like a big puppy. The guy says it's good that she hasn't picked out an outfit yet, because he's just about to go there, and asks Juliana if they can go together. The girl says she has to talk to Anan first, to which the guy says she should go to him, and Juliana agrees. The young man says no wonder Mr. Bisher and Anan chose her, for she is so beautiful. Juliana reflects that she has not received compliments for a long time, and thanks him. The young man says he will prepare the knights before the party. Juliana looks very surprised when she hears about the knights. The guy says they're doing outside stuff. He mentions that Anan is in no danger, but since he's pretending to be human, the two of them need a full escort, so they'll pick up the best holy knights possible. Juliana is very much surprised by this, asking if the holy knights are not the main armed force of the central temple. And then we understand why holy knights are the main force of the temple. It turns out a high-ranking holy knight has the strength of the Imperial Guard, and the most powerful divine power in the temple. The young lad says it's a must for those who are not only cared for by Sir Anan, but also by the high god Bisher. The girl realizes she doesn't have many options right now, and says she has to thank the Holy Father and the priests later. The young lad says they will be very pleased, for she is the treasure of their temple, a treasure they will recreate. A young guy opens the door and tries to say something to the girl, but an exasperated Anan appears and asks who he is. The kid says it's an honor to introduce himself to the brother of the supreme god Bisher. Turns out his name is Roger, and he's a holy knight in Juliana's chain of command. Juliana is very much surprised that this young man introduced himself as a holy knight. This surprise is noticed by Roger himself, and he asks the girl if she is surprised. Juliana says she didn't even realize he was a holy knight, and Anan looks very puzzled, and says he sees they've grown quite close. Juliana and Roger, surprised by Anan's words, the knight says that if his behavior was unacceptable then he will give Anan his life, and he can have it back. Anan tells Roger to forget about death, because what will he gain from the death of someone like him? In his opinion, the personal knights of Juliana are much more important. Juliana is very surprised that she has personal knights, She asks if that means that they are under her command, to which Roger replies that of course they are, because their power is equal to her power. Juliana says that she suddenly has personal knights and asks should she be happy. She thinks that having personal knights is quite burdensome. Anan says he can create a guard of knights for Juliana too, to which a very happy Roger says that of course he can, but he asks him who told him he needed someone else's validation in the first place. Roger says that of course Juliana already knows that, to which the girl says that of course she believes it. Anan thinks about it. He says that he doesn't like this guy at all. The three of them have already gotten to the place where Juliana is supposed to get her outfit. She walks into the room, greets everyone and says she's going to a party so she needs to pick out some clothes. The tailor says that her outfit is ready, and now she is preparing her brooch for the costume. Juliana is very much surprised that they did it so quickly. The dressmaker hands her a beautiful brooch, with a large purple stone in the middle, and tells her that Juliana would have gone to the party anyway, so they started making her dress ahead of time. Roger admires the brooch and says that it is as beautiful as Julian's eyes, but Anan tells him that he is blind because her eyes are so much more beautiful.